So the 127-day trial of Sean Fitzpatrick ended this week, with Judge Aylmer saying, "You're free to go. Thank you for attending." When Sean Fitzpatrick was asked outside whether or not he was going to celebrate, he said, No, I did my celebrating last night." Such was his confidence that the case would end with his acquittal. And he wasn't just acquitted on 1 or 2 charges, all 27 charges were dropped. Judge Aylmer criticised the Office of the Department of Corporate Enforcement, saying it was an unfair trial. The key issue goes back to the 5th of May 2015, when the senior prosecutor Paul O'Higgins stood up to address the court. Any hopes that the trial was about to begin were dashed back then in May 2015. It was revealed that Mr. Kevin O'Connell from the Office of the Department of Corporate Enforcement had shredded 16 pages worth of documents. When asked why he'd done this, he said he was feeling unwell, but not physically unwell. He was under a lot of mental strain. CCTV footage showed Mr. O'Connell walking to the shredding room and having a conversation with Garda Gary Callanan. He then, on the CCTV footage, is seen jauntily walking away. Gardaí never investigated the shredding of these documents, and neither did the Office of the Department of Corporate Enforcement in any way discipline Mr. O'Connell. Now, Kevin O'Connell had never before been in charge of a trial of this scale. Why did corporate enforcement put a staff solicitor in charge of such a trial? Did they want the trial thrown out? But then again, the state itself had only appointed 12 Gardaí to investigate the biggest white-collar crimes this country had ever seen. Between 2002 and 2007, Fitzpatrick, his wife and family increased the loans that they took from 10 million in 2002 to 100 million in loans in 2007. As chairman of Anglo-Irish Bank, Sean Fitzpatrick had hidden these loans for 8 years from any kind of prying eyes. In October 2008, Fitzpatrick was interviewed on RTE and refused to apologise for anything that he'd done. He said, "The cause of our problems is global, so I cannot say sorry with any degree of sincerity or decency, but I can say thank you." He then, in the same interview, recommended cutting the sacred cows of health, child benefit and pensions for old people. But in a way, Sean Fitzpatrick was right. Of course, Sean Fitzpatrick is a criminal by any definition of the word. The consequences of the actions that he took in terms of our homelessness crisis, in terms of the cuts to workers' wages, the deficit in our pension funds, the whole NAMA fiasco, we cannot in any way overestimate the social cost of what the bankers did. But he wasn't the only one. And they had political assistance for what they did. So in a way, when Sean Fitzpatrick points the finger at global capitalism, and in particular at Irish capitalism, and says, "I wasn't the only one," we agree with you, Shawnee. There are lots of other bankers and politicians who should be behind bars. In December 2008, the Irish state put 1.5 billion into Anglo-Irish Bank for a 75% stake in the bank. We were buying out all the bad debts of the developers. In January 2009, Brian Cowan of Fianna Fáil said it was business as usual at Anglo-Irish Bank. Everything was okay. Yet by June to September 2009, we put in another 4 billion. On the 30th of March 2010, we put in a further 8.3 billion. Then on the 10th of August 2010, we put in 10 billion plus 1.4 billion in costs. Most of the dodgy loans on the Anglo books ended up being transferred to NAMA. Anglo was the lender of choice to property developers. The Irish banks had lent out 342 billion, all to stoke up the property bubble. Politicians who weren't interested in building a real productive economy wanted to keep this bubble going. Anglo-Irish Bank borrowed funds from German and French banks who were flush with cash because the German ruling class had so pushed down German workers' wages, they had lots of money to lend out. Property developers connected to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael bought up huge banks of land, inflating the price of land and inflating the cost of building a house. As house prices skyrocketed, the developers bought more land to build more houses, to make more money, to buy more land, to build more houses, to make more money. The trial of Sean Fitzpatrick was constructed in such a way that it was bound to fail, because the elite in this country wanted that trial to fail. Because nobody wanted Sean Fitzpatrick pointing the finger at the landlord parties, the developers and the rest of the bankers. Contrast how the Irish state has dealt with Sean Fitzpatrick's trial, the incompetence, the dismissal of the case and the way they've dealt with the trial of water activists from Jobstown. The state has put far more money and resources and far more Gardaí into crushing legitimate dissent against our aggressive water charge than they have against the white-collar criminal who helped to crash the economy.